Chaos erupts as thousands of migrants join a caravan trying to travel through Mexico to the U.S. Meantime, President Trump is threatening to take action if that group completes its journey. As correspondent Omar Jimenez shows us, some people are willing to risk it all for the American dream.
A caravan of migrants on its way to the United States erupted into chaos at the Mexico-Guatemala border. Mexican police and riot gear pushed back as some people in the crowd broke through a steel fence that had been padlocked shut. Other migrants resorted to jumping off the bridge into the river below, either to escape the chaos or to continue their journey north by water. The mass of people originated in Honduras. Many who joined the caravan were fleeing violence or said they had no other choice, also noting they were desperate for work.
The situation is very hard. There's a lot of violence, there's no work, so we are asking the Mexicans to let us through for a better life.
Others looking to give their kids a fresh start.
First and foremost, with the help of God, we'll pass because we are workers who are going to struggle for the futures of our children.
Meanwhile, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was in Mexico and says he had a good conversation with Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto, adding the two countries would be jointly focused on the caravan issue.
This is an organized effort to come through and violate the sovereignty of Mexico.
That message delivered on behalf of President Trump, who said this at a Montana rally Thursday night.
As you know, I'm willing to send the military to defend our southern border if necessary.
In Washington, I'm Omar Jimenez.
Some 2,000 Central American migrants took a vote today and decided to continue heading north towards the U.S. Earlier in the day, the group crossed a river from Guatemala into Mexico, circumventing authorities. Other migrants packed a bridge connecting the two nations. A number of women and children were processed through Mexico.
Chaos unfolds as a caravan of Honduran migrants made it to the Guatemala-Mexico border. People were climbing fences, holding Honduran flags. The group includes children, and it was pushed back by authorities. What appeared to be tear gas was even fired as the crowd moved toward Mexican police.
Our message is we're not criminals. We're coming over here because we want to work. We need a job. We need better, a better life. That's why we're here.
Mexican officials previously said they would process asylum seekers at the border. It's not clear, though, how that will all play out. Now you can see children even on the receiving end of tear gas. It looks like police also set up a barricade to block those migrants from entering, leaving many stopped on the bridge. You saw there in the aerial shot, some of them on the bridge jumping into the river below.
With just 17 days now before the midterm elections, President Trump is using a humanitarian crisis south of the border to get voters to the polls. Thousands of migrants are believed to be headed to the U.S., fleeing poverty and crime in Honduras as they enter Mexico and Guatemala. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo met with his Mexican counterpart Friday, getting briefed on the situation.
This is a large group of people. They are putting women and children in front of the caravan to use as shields as they make their way through.
President Trump is using this as a platform to get voters to choose Republicans in the midterm, saying that they are the only ones who will block people from entering the U.S. illegally.
The military needs to be deployed to our southern border immediately to stop the caravan of thousands of illegals pouring into our nation. Right now is a very dangerous time for Americans. Border control is essential to your safety and the safety of your family. The military, the National Guard, ICE, Border Patrol, and DHS needs to block this caravan from entering our nation. Now, I'm not saying they're all criminals. What I am asking is, who are they? What I am saying is, I want to vet them, screen them. I want to find out who among them is a criminal, who among them is a gang member, like the notorious MS-13 gang members who arrogantly rode into our United States by invitation during the Obama years and are now in New York and elsewhere brutally and savagely murdering innocent American citizens. I want to know who is a pedophile, who is a sex offender, who thinks they're entitled to beat their wives. I want to know who has an alcohol problem, who has a drug problem, who likes to drive drunk, and who has no problem hauling drugs for the cartel. And if you can prove that you're not one of them or any other kind of criminal, I want to know what you have to offer us. What do you bring to this great nation? What are you going to contribute? Why should we be proud to count you as an American, other than adding to the Democrats' voting bloc and continuing the mob mentality that you have already exhibited you're proficient at? Now, if you're not a criminal, I want you to get to the back of the line behind everyone else who waited for a visa, came here legally, hired a lawyer, learned American history, and swore allegiance to this great nation. And only then am I interested in even talking to you about entering. I, for one, am sick and tired of the sense of entitlement that illegals have to enter this country and then immediately claim their constitutional rights as they carry the flags, not of America, but the flags of their country. And God forbid we try to deport them to the country whose flag they so proudly wave. They have no claim on this country. They are not entitled to be here. They break our laws to come here. Now, this is not a left or right issue. This is a security issue, a safety issue. We simply cannot have people about whom we know nothing living next door to us, working next to us, or driving next to us. Crossers claim they're running from violence in their home countries. I spent my career fighting on behalf of innocent, helpless, silent victims of crime, victimized by violence, criminals who should have been stopped long before the crime. You're telling me because they're being victimized that every one of them is a victim and therefore entitled to come here as opposed to anywhere else on the planet? Go to the UN. Stay in Mexico. Now they say their poverty is justification for illegal entry. I've got news for you. Millions are suffering from poverty all over the world. Haiti, Uganda, Zimbabwe, the Congo, third world countries. So why is it just Central Americans and Mexicans are the poverty-stricken ones pouring into this country by the millions? Why? Why? Because they can. Because no one has told them they can't. Because no one has stopped them. They come because there's a big prize at the end. Education, medication, housing, food stamps, all the things that you pay for. So you want open borders. Look at what it's done to Europe. If the left, the mob, and the demon rats had their way, there'd be rogue cities and rogue zones all over the U.S., just like Europe, with crime-ridden zones where law-abiding citizens, even law enforcement, are afraid to enter, and for good reason. The left, then, the Democrats in this country add an additional layer of protection so illegal criminals cannot be arrested in sanctuary cities and states where American citizens are thus put at risk. These people don't want a border wall. Have you ever asked yourself why? Do you really think they have a philosophical or an ideological objection to the concept of a wall or protection? Of course not. All these bozos are protected by doors and fences and security, yet they want our borders open. They want illegals to cross as a mob and act as a mob and unite around a state they have no right to be in and register and vote Democrat. Many bring the poison, drugs that take the lives of hundreds of thousands of Americans. A primer. 90% of heroin used in this country comes through the southern border. And Mexico thumbs its nose at us and says, your people asked for it. I got an idea. It's time to play hardball. The foreign aid to those countries, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, some $464 million in foreign aid from us, end it. Congress needs to stop the flow of our money to them. And if they need it so badly, use it to take care of the poverty and the victimization in their country. And I am sick and tired of people telling us to have a heart. We have a heart. We are the most generous country in the world. In 1986, Ronald Reagan gave all illegals amnesty. But amnesty does nothing but create an incentive for additional crossings by illegals. And so, here we are again. And for all of you who want to trash President Trump, I've got even more news for you. Presidents Bush and Obama sent the military to the border to the tune of $1.3 billion. And it's time to do it again. So let me be clear. When you cross the border into these United States illegally, expect to be arrested. You do not have the right to come here. We did not invite you here. You cannot stay here. And on your way out, you can tell the Democrats, George Soros, and the angry mob that's coming here, you either come the right way like everyone else, or be ready to face the military and a one-way ticket back to where you came from. And that's my open.
A moment of crisis at the Mexico border as the fate of hundreds of Central American migrants fleeing violence and poverty back home for the American dream is in limbo. The men, women, and children are part of a caravan trying to reach the U.S. They reached Mexico yesterday after storming a border fence in Guatemala earlier in the day. But as they streamed onto a bridge separating Guatemala and Mexico, they were stopped by dozens of Mexican police in riot gear on the other side. As nightfall approached, many prepared to spend the night in the open, drained from days of walking and frustrated by efforts to block their path forward. Some received medical treatment from Mexican Marines, while others were cared for at a nearby shelter. Today, they are not moving.
Los integrantes de la caravana
Mexico's president is calling on the migrants to seek legal entry into Mexico and vowed to tackle the caravan. As U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo met his Mexican counterpart in Mexico City and urged the country to ensure the procession did not reach its final destination, the United States.
This will be an election of Kavanaugh, the caravan, law and order, and common sense.
And illegal immigration is emerging as an increasingly important theme in the upcoming U.S. midterm elections. President Donald Trump, in the final days of campaigning, is accusing the Democrats of being behind the caravan, and once again today accusing the Dems of wanting open borders.
They want to open your borders, let people in illegally, and then they want to pay for those people for health care, for education. They want to give them cars. They want to give them driver's licenses.
More shocking video to present to you right now. The Honduran Caravan caught, members of it getting caught, paid to invade the United States. The GOP representative now sounding the alarm. Christine Layla for the Gateway Pundit reports that the caravan of mostly Honduran migrants exploded to a whopping 4,000 people as it approached the Mexico-Guatemala border, despite President Trump's warning to cut off U.S. aid. The caravan had approximately 1,300 people on Monday and managed to balloon in just days, tripling the number of people heading towards the United States border just in time for the midterm elections. Yeah, the Democrats need those votes, don't they? Well, the Associated Press reported that the Hondurans were actually spotted in Chiquimula, Guatemala, marching through rain, determined to make it to the Mexican border. Because the migrant crowd has grown to over 4,000 people, the Mexican government has sent an additional 500 police to its border with Guatemala, according to the NBC News. So here's the question. Just how did the migrant caravan get so big in a matter of 2 days? Well, footage surfaced of Honduran women and children being given cash to join the caravan. Friends, they are fomenting chaos. The question, who's funding this? Only one name comes to mind. For me, it's got to be George Soros. Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida sounded the alarm and called for an investigation into the source when he tweeted out this video of women holding babies and young children being given cash to join the caravan. Take a look at this.
Que se vaya. Solo las mujeres primero. Solo las mujeres primero. Vayan saliendo. Ahí está la
Véngase para acá.
Absolutely unbelievable. Soros money, no doubt. Footage in Honduras giving cash to women and children to join the caravan and storm the U.S. border. This is an invasion, friends. This is an invasion of the United States being funded by George Soros. Who else? Who else is going to do this? Wow. Time to investigate the source. Soros, U.S.-backed NGOs? President Trump issued a stern warning to the Honduran president this week, threatening to cut U.S. aid immediately if the caravan was not stopped. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also went to Mexico on Friday to discuss plans to stop the caravan. So this is an invasion, friends. The United States is under assault. It's all being funded by leftists in order to foment chaos at the border, to inflame the political situation so that the left can have more talking points to blame Trump for separating families and being an inhumane barbarian. Meanwhile, Democrats continue to try to get votes from the illegals.
Counselor to President Kellyanne Conway. Kellyanne, thanks for being here today. You know, it's interesting. The president just then suggested that, you know, there might be more behind this and this sudden caravan right before the midterms. I must tell you, it seems to have happened all of a sudden. I mean, I haven't heard about a caravan since Obama invited them in 2014 and 15. What do you think is the genesis of this sudden movement toward the U.S. border?
Well, Judge, whatever the genesis, it's so great that the cameras and the Klieg lights are on, because I'm always a fan of just showing America what is really happening. Not just what is being curated through some of the reports and cherry-picked through some of the reports, but just shine a light, bring the cameras. And now people can see what it really means. Before, they saw what they called the kids in cages, which of course turned out many of them to be President Obama's kids in cages. But let them see what's actually happening, and let them juxtapose that with a president who is saying, in light of the modernized revolutionary trade deal, the USMCA, Mexican-Canadian-American trade deal, that we have better relationships with Mexico now. They respect this president and commander-in-chief, and they are helping now.
Yeah, Kellyanne, if they respect this president and commander-in-chief, and I believe you and I believe the president, I should be comfortable believing that Mexico is going to stop them before they come through the United States.
Well, they ought to do that, because I'll tell you, if you look statistically, Janine, and I want everyone to know that until very recently, the predominant trafficker, predominant person coming over the border was a single male, one male person coming in from Mexico. Now, 45% or so are family units are coming in, unaccompanied minors or people who say they're a family coming in from Central America. This is a problem because we are encouraging people to smuggle children over and pretend they are a family unit. There's no way for folks to know instantly at the border. And by the way, and I talked to a number of cabinet secretaries and other senior officials this week, don't forget, our brave men and women at the border are doing the best that they can. And they risk their lives every single day to be there and ask legitimate questions. If you want to come through one of the 26 ports of entry, if you want to stand in line and immigrate into the world's most generous country to immigrants, kids. You can do that. We're talking about the sexual assaults are up now. The child smuggling is up. The drug smuggling is up. All of this because we don't have, we're a sovereign nation without physical borders, and this president ran
Kellyanne,
and
I
won
want to talk
on exactly
about the
that issue.
statistics as it relates to the heroin crossing the border, how our southern borders are used by the cartel as a point of entry, that poison that is killing hundreds of thousands of Americans, 1,000 a week minimum.
That's right. There's no doubt. This president has had as a major focus stopping the drug supply and drug demand crisis that is rolling this nation. 72,000 Americans dead last year. 90% or so of all heroin in this country comes through the southern border. Obviously, the cocaine comes through the southern border. And now, increasingly, the fentanyl that is manufactured in the labs in China, we are told, is also coming through the southern border because everybody knows it's an easy way to get in. And so this is very problematic because this president, and many people don't focus on this, he's constantly talking about the poison coming over the southern border, that it's coming to your community. And this opioid and drug crisis is no longer somebody else's kid, somebody else's coworker, somebody else's community.
Oh, it's real
It's touching every nook and cranny in this country.
Another difficult day for hundreds of migrants who are still on that bridge connecting Guatemala to Mexico. They're crossing the Suchiate River there. That's the borderline between Central America and Mexico. And it was a difficult night for many thousands of migrants who spent the night on that very bridge. Some of them recovering from injuries they suffered in a brief clash on Friday as they tried to charge the gates heading into Mexico. Some people rammed up against metal fences there. Children suffering tear gas injuries after federal police in Mexico did all they could to block those migrants from entering through the southern border of Mexico. The situation is becoming an immigration crisis now in this region. The governments of Guatemala and Honduras are meeting. Their presidents are having a high-level meeting on this day to figure out what they can do to get some of those migrants back home. Meantime, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees is meeting with Mexican government officials. Mexico called on the UNHCR for help in this situation. UNHCR trying to figure out exactly what it can do at this stage. And meantime, there are going to be thousands of people on the border in Guatemala waiting to see if they can get into Mexico. The Mexican government says those who have visas and passports will be allowed in, but the many others who don't are going to be stuck. And if they do get into Mexico, into the southern state of Mexico, Chiapas, the situation will become even more difficult as there are no jobs for them and really no places for them to stay. And in the end, as we've been reporting, many are traveling with little children, elderly people, and some people who are quite sick now because of the long journey they've been on. Frank Contreras, CGTN, Mexico City.
Mesa is just 150 miles from the U.S.-Mexico border, a location where more than 5,000 migrants, of course, have their sights on. And today, the Mexican government, perhaps fearing retribution from President Trump, tried to block the group from crossing into the Mexico-Guatemala frontier. But as you can see here, the crowd broke down the gates and started streaming in. Police using pepper spray were able to finally stop the rest of the caravan, but not after many got through. Now, the Ingram angle spoke exclusively tonight with a Mexican official who told us the following. The migrants are using women, and some pregnant, and children at the front of this line in an effort to intimidate the Mexican police. So obviously they're not going to use force against women and children. And the same official relayed to us that there are currently 1,000 Mexican federales at its border with Guatemala. Reinforcements are being sent in as we speak. And the police are telling this source that many of the people inside the caravan grew violent today, injuring 6 to 7 Mexican police officers who themselves have no weapons except shields, and they do have some batons if things get bad, and tear gas. The official closed his conversation with the Ingram angle saying following, we will not allow our country to be literally invaded from the south. It is critical now to take a stand because if this model is the immigration model going forward, you will see a caravan of this size coming every week. So Mexico has its own interest in stopping these caravans from flying through Mexico. And now what you see right here is not from the caravan, but take a look at this video Fox News obtained. This is yesterday morning at 3:30 a.m. in Yuma, Arizona. Now you can see 4 different groups of illegals climbing over the border wall dropping right into the United States. And as President Trump said last night, this could be the election of the caravan. And I wanted to bring in right now former House Speaker Newt Gingrich. Newt, thanks for being here tonight. A big night. Let's start with this caravan issue. The president said this could be the election of Kavanaugh and the caravan. Kavanaugh, we understand, because of fairness and due process, and men feel like they're being targeted unfairly. Why is this caravan issue important both to Mexico and, of course, to the United States?
Well, the caravan brings into vivid attention that the Feinstein open borders bill and that Speaker Pelosi's attitude about immigration are such big dangers to the country. The Gallup World Poll did a survey, and in Latin America and the Caribbean, there are 179 million people who would like to come to the U.S. 179
Well, our
million.
country is 320 million, right?
That's to be over half the population. Right. And what we have to confront is exactly what that Mexican official said. If we're not prepared to stop this caravan, how big will the next one be? How many will there be? And I think this puts Democrats, frankly, in a very difficult box. They don't like to control the border. They don't like to stop immigration. In fact, Stacey Abrams, the Democratic candidate for governor of Georgia, said she regarded the undocumented and the documented as equal. So she's basically saying, if you get here illegally, you're part of her majority coalition. San Francisco's passed a rule that allows people here illegally to vote. So the Democrats are now caught in that as people watch this.
These are devastating images, Newt. Look at these images. They're devastating.
You talk about mobs versus jobs. You're seeing exactly the kind of mob behavior that the Democrats have led to.
About 2 blocks from here, Newt, there's a homeless shelter. Any given night, there are individuals outside waiting to get in. There are not enough beds. They're on the streets. They're destitute. Many of them former military. They're veterans, down on their luck, some with mental health issues, some not, some just down on their luck. A lot of, I think, Americans, and I noticed this on radio today, they give to various organizations, international organizations that help children in need, including in Central America, like Food for the Poor, all these great organizations. They say, look, we have a lot of problems here. We're compassionate people. We do not want to feel like we're bad people or horrible people because we don't want to say anyone who wants to come in can come in. But when you see these pictures, this is the proof of what no consequences for crossing into our country illegally will bring. These individuals, gosh, you can't even blame them. They know if they get a foothold into the United States, Newt, what happens?
Well, look, they're carrying the Honduras flag.
Right.
This is an invasion. This is an act of attacking the United States sovereignty. And the fact
right now, Mexico. And I want to thank the Mexican officials and the Mexican police who are putting their lives on the line and getting a lot of grief from leftist politicians who are happy to give Trump a pain in the you-know-what over this issue.
Well, I think actually this is the best Mexico's ever been.
Ever.
I attribute that to President Trump and Secretary Pompeo, but also I think to the Mexican government beginning to realize that this is going to be a crisis. You can't have thousands and thousands and thousands of people decide to break the law and have any expectation that civilization is going to withstand it.
I want to hear from Mike Pompeo addressing the issue of women and children being used, Newt, as a type of human shield. Let's watch.
This is a large group of people. They are putting women and children in front of the caravan to use as shields as they make their way through. This is an organized effort to come through and violate the sovereignty of Mexico. And so all that we can to support the decisions that Mexico makes about how they're going to address this very serious and important issue to their country.
Newt, I think this is a major challenge, as you said, to the Democrat Party. They have embraced open borders. They have welcomed in low-skilled workers, low-wage workers, as have some Republicans. Let's be very clear about this over the years, because it keeps wages down, and a lot of businesses are happy with that. They get cheap labor, pay them cash. They don't complain. They live 10 in a house. And it's good for some of these construction work crews in D.C., most of them speaking Spanish, hardworking people. But nevertheless, it has hurt American industries, from landscaping to roofing to plumbing. The list goes on. I'm telling you, this is a mistake for the Democrats to embrace this. A huge mistake.
And I think the whole imagery that you now have these people. I mean, first of all, they're political activists. They're not refugees. They're political activists. You raised the question last week, which I keep raising on Twitter. Who's paying for all this? As you mentioned to me just before the show, this has gone from 3,000 to now we think 5,000 people. If it takes $7,000 a person, that's a $35 million project.
Huge.
Now, who's paying for it? And by the way, if it's an American group paying someone to come and break the law, that's called aiding and abetting, and that's a crime.
Yeah, the Lutheran Church and the Catholic Church does get about $90 million to Catholic Church. Lutheran Church, not quite so much, to resettle migrants in the United States. So a lot of the migrants that cross the border we can't keep them, we don't have any housing, are then dropped at bus depots. William Lanchinesse at Fox did a great report on this yesterday. And then they're transported all across the United States, first in shelters paid for by the Catholic Church, Lutheran Church, other organizations. They do get an enormous amount of money to do this. So there's an interesting like revolving door of cash from the federal government to these NGOs and 501c3s. I want to play a soundbite from tonight. The president, Newt, talking about this very issue. Let's watch in Mesa.
Right now, as you know, Mexico is on their southern border, and they're fighting some bad people in that group. You know, you see the people come up and you listen to the fake news back there and you think they're all wonderful people, right? No, you think, I'm serious. You think they're all wonderful people. You got some bad people in those groups. You got some tough people in those groups. And I'll tell you what, this country doesn't want them, okay?
Yeah, and I think, again, America is a welcoming country. We love merit-based legal immigration, true refugees, a lot of Christians in the Middle East who have had a really hard time getting here. In Western Europeans try to get the visa lottery, which a lot of us want to get away with, do away with. But Newt, he's right. America, they see that this has gotten totally out of control, and it's just a question of fairness at this point to the American worker.
Well, it's also a question of fairness to people who have obeyed the law. Remember, we accept more legal immigrants
1 million a year
than any other country in the world.
1 million.
So those folks have all obeyed the law. They look over here at somebody who's breaking the law, and I think there's a lot of resentment of why are these people being able to break the law.
Newt, this was Jen Psaki, of course, former Obama administration official, on CNN talking about job growth. Speaking of the midterms, I want to play this. Jen.
The job growth has been the case for 6 years. The job growth was actually better in the last year of the Obama presidency than it was in the first year of the Trump presidency. So he's benefiting from that. The reality is that a good economy is good for politics for the person in charge.
It was better under Obama. Was manufacturing jobs?
She had a better job under Obama. I think let's start with her. I mean, I think she had a better job.
It's a Friday night here. It's really fun.
No, you look, I mean, lowest African-American unemployment in history, lowest Latino unemployment in history. I think we're now have the lowest general unemployment since like 1969. It's pretty hard not to believe that President Trump and his policies have made a very positive impact. The only major economy that's growing right now is the United States. None of the others are growing. And I think that we're doing something right. But I also think it comes back to this question, you know, we want to be a country that is welcoming to people who want to become Americans. And we want to become a country that's welcoming to people who want to obey the law and play by the rules. And I think this whole notion of jobs versus mobs is real. And you've seen it here at home with Democratic mobs. You're seeing it now trying to come up from Guatemala with a mob. And this is a very serious question. And you've had some very strange comments. I mean, the senator from Virginia who said that we ought to be punching and fighting in the streets. The former attorney general said we ought to be kicking Republicans.
Hillary saying we can't be civil, you know, until we win again.
That's right. So there's a whole,
because they were so civil back then.
Right. So there's all we need to recognize that people have got to take a deep breath and ask themselves, what kind of America do you want to live in? And do you really want to live in an America where mobs are going to come into your restaurant to drive you out of it? Is that really what you're comfortable with? If you are, then you ought to vote Democrat.
I'm begging them to do that to me, Newt. Bang it.
That'll be a great evening.
Bring it. That's all I can say. This is President Trump tonight speaking about what America ultimately over time turns into if this continues. Let's watch.
They will try to plunge our country into a nightmare of gridlock, poverty, and chaos. You know that. It's going to be a mess. Democrats want to raise your taxes, impose socialism on our country, turn us into a Venezuela, turn us into another Venezuela.
Now, Newt, is that just overstatement?
I don't think so. I think if you look at what for example, the Democrats say they want to have universal health care for everybody. And in California, Gavin Newsom, the Democratic candidate for governor, says, and he would give it away to every illegal immigrant who showed up. Well, if word went out worldwide, get to California, they'll take care of your health care, the sheer cost of that would break the American system. And I think we need to understand, these are folks who don't have a clue about the real world. What they're focused on is power. They want power over you and me. They want power to define how we're allowed to behave. They know nothing about creating jobs and nothing about economic growth.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Nick Oresco. It's been 1 year since Lucio Perez, a Springfield resident, entered sanctuary in an Amherst church. Our 22 News reporter Jennifer Zarate joins us after speaking with Lucio and the community members about his time in sanctuary.
That's right, Nick. Lucio's case has garnered tremendous public support, and today hundreds of people gathered at the First Congregational Church in Amherst to demonstrate their solidarity with Lucio. 1 year ago, on October 18th, Lucio Perez, a Guatemalan immigrant, made the decision to take sanctuary inside the First Congregational Church in Amherst to avoid deportation.
Separado de la familia es como que...
Being separated from your family, the way I would describe it is as if they tear something out of your heart.
Y es por eso que...
And that's why I always say that we need to keep on fighting, because soon we will achieve victory.
Hundreds of people gathered at First Church Amherst Saturday night to support Lucio in his fight to keep his family together.
There's been an amazing community that has been created, that has grown up and come together to support Lucio and his family and to support the cause of immigration justice. And today was an opportunity to say to all of them together in one place, thank you, we couldn't do this without you.
People migrate to this country because they want a better life. And what Lucio has done is giving us all a little bit of what it takes to have courage, but also to be away from your family. It takes a lot of discipline, and I'm proud to call him my hermano.
Another supporter, a Holland immigrant, told 22 News she doesn't agree with the current climate of immigration policy, which is why she said it's important to support Lucio and his family.
I had to do a lot of paperwork, but I had no problem because I'm white. I think it's terrible that people get discriminated because of the color of their skin.
Following the gathering, community members joined Lucio and his family in blessing the church as a sanctuary and calling for freedom for Lucio and justice for all immigrants living in the U.S. Reverend Kemper told 22 News they will continue to stand with Lucio until the day he can go home to be with his family. Jennifer Zarate, 22 News.
We'll continue talking a bit here about immigration and agriculture. Walk onto many dairy farms in Wisconsin and you will find a melting pot in the milking parlor. Studies show more than half of the labor force are immigrants. Those workers and the farmers who employ them live in fear of increased deportation actions, as we saw in Wisconsin just weeks ago, and what that could mean to the state's $43 billion dairy industry. Do you believe immigrant labor should remain a part of Wisconsin's dairy industry? And what would you push for as governor? Governor Walker, we begin with you.
Well, again, as I mentioned, we're a nation both of immigrants and of laws. When I was looking through some of my father's papers recently after his passing, I saw some of the details about some of our ancestors. Thomas Llewellyn, who my father's first name was Llewellyn, came from South Central Wales, where his father was a miner, and he came here to America as a blacksmith because he wanted to pursue freedom and opportunities like so many immigrants do today. But he also came because this was a nation of laws and a stable government. And so we need to uphold those laws. And Jessica, that question probably would be best suited for the U.S. Senate U.S. Senate debate, I should say, because those laws are addressed at the federal level. Do I think we should have open to immigrants here in the state, whether it deals with our dairy industry or anybody else? Yeah. For legal immigration in the state of Wisconsin, we need people to come in. We now have more people in the workforce than we've ever had before in the state's history. We not only need to keep our graduates here, we need to bring people in from other states and other places to help us grow the economy.
Mr. Evers?
Well, first of all, we heard that Governor Walker said no to the DACA kids. And as far as in-state tuition, other states have done it, and under the same circumstances. But what concerns me the most is we continue to pass on this issue with our president. And this campaign is not about Donald Trump. It's about Scott Walker and Tony Evers. But it is about the governor's ability to call out bad public policy at the national level. When young people were being ripped away from their parents at the border, and people asked the governor of Wisconsin whether he thought about that, and he said it's a federal issue. Well, it's not. It's a human issue. It's a human issue, and the governor of the state of Wisconsin needs to weigh in on that. The governor of Wisconsin has to weigh in on the issue of immigration. I will work hard. We have to have a comprehensive reform in the state. We must be able to do that. In addition, I would provide driver's permits for people that are working in Wisconsin and
Time
they're
is up, and that goes.
That's always Trump's strategy, to close ranks around a certain kind of racial tribalism, to close ranks around whiteness. When you say make America great again, that's a dog whistle to white folk.
Welcome to this week's Wacky Moments of Liberal Expression. We are just a few weeks away from the midterm, so the liberal media has to take things up a notch and really start pushing the notion that white supremacists are taking over the Republican Party.
With the midterm elections just 20 days away, this morning a rare look inside a fringe group hoping to capitalize on deep divisions within our country.
NBC national correspondent Peter Alexander investigates how some white nationalists claim they are quietly gaining momentum.
Watchdogs say groups like this often disguise white supremacist views. Among Identity Europa's goals, Casey told us, covertly taking over the GOP.
These are such disturbing allegations.
Disturbing allegations indeed, but these allegations of racism are being promoted all across liberal media right now.
One of the side effects of the nightmare of the Trump presidency is that Fox News has given itself increasingly to white nationalist propaganda. That language of being replaced comes straight out of the marchers in Charlottesville last year.
Now, according to the GOP, these women are part of the liberal mob. Now, they're not as endearing as, let's say, the Proud Boys or the Confederacy kin that Republicans like to cotton to.
Yes, Chris Cuomo's magic wall. It actually changes history and links the Republicans, instead of Democrats, as being cotton to the Confederacy. But it wouldn't be a week in the world of cable news without the predictable Nazi lockstep reference.
And at a time when Quislings meekly march in lockstep behind a morally disabled president, I don't know how you do it. It's appalling.
All right, so according to the liberal media, you are now an appalling traitor if you support the president. But it's okay to be an appalling deceiver and push your liberal agenda and divide on the issue of race, like in this fantastically inaccurate CNN segment.
President Trump and his son Don Jr. said this week white men have a lot to fear right now.
They did? They said that? Or did you just actually add the word white because you're a divisive tool?
President Trump and his son Don Jr. said this week white men have a lot to fear right now. Here's comedian Michael Che's take.
I heard the president say on TV that, quote, "It's a very scary time for young men in America."
So let the record show that SNL is more accurate at quoting the president saying young men than CNN is. Somehow young men has become white men. So now that they've shown the full screen, they'll correct themselves, right?
That's always Trump's strategy, to close ranks around a certain kind of racial tribalism, to close ranks around whiteness. When you say make America great again, that's a dog whistle to white folk. That's not to black people. He's always doing that. And so, you know, the whole they're stealing our country narrative plays into his immigration policy, and it stokes white fear, saying that it's a scary time to be a white man because you get accused of something that you didn't do. For that to come out of Donald Trump's mouth.
Except it didn't come from Trump's mouth. But, you know, enjoy your little fantasy news segment there. Spend time with that. Maybe they're near Chris Cuomo's magic wall, which somehow removes accuracy and changes history. Because it's easy to play the race card when you're reporting on things people actually never said. It's a lot more difficult when you're trying to defend a liberal that was once touted as Harvard Law's first Native American professor, especially after she announces she has had a DNA test that proves she's less Native American than you could have guessed. But does the liberal media blame her for playing the race card to benefit her career? No. You know, that is the fault of white people.
Remember, a lot of black and brown people in this country do not have the data to prove where they come from. Partly that's because of slave records that weren't dated, but secondly, because of miscegenation law. So the concept of quantifying culture, that is a white and majority concept.
Wait, no, that's not enough. The liberal media wants to protect Warren so bad, they blame the Cherokee Nation.
Cherokee Nation. Secretary of State Cherokee Nation said in a statement, DNA testing cannot prove that Warren is Cherokee or any other tribe. And there's Chuck Hoskin, Jr., Secretary of State. Do we think that the decision itself was a mistake? Do we think that the timing was a mistake?
In terms of the Cherokee Nation statement, I found that to be ridiculous. I am also part Cherokee, but I have not taken a DNA test. I'm not trying to join a tribe or claim membership in a tribe. The decision to do a DNA test to be able to, quote, prove that she is part Cherokee may not have been the best method. Yeah. I also think that the Cherokee Nation response was problematic because it actually ignores the fact that DNA testing historically has been used to exclude black natives from tribal affiliation.
Yes, the Cherokee Nation is now a racist. It's nothing to do with Elizabeth Warren playing the minority card. Hearing liberals address the Cherokee Nation is problematic.
That the Cherokee Nation response was problematic.
Is Democratic history repeating itself? Good old Democrat Andrew Jackson? Well, he didn't like the sovereignty of the Cherokees making their own decisions either.
Was problematic.
That's another historical fact that would likely be erased at Cuomo's magic wall. But what cannot be erased is if the liberal media didn't make up this racial crap, they would have to focus on real issues and the strength of the Democratic Party's message. And even they know that's a little tough.
As we were asked a question on Colbert, what's the Democrats' message?
Yeah,
who is the one Democrat who's inspired you, that's put the message together? And I will say, for once in our lives, we sat there stunned. We had nothing to say.
And not even Cuomo's magic wall can fix that.
It's not impossible that despite the train wreck that is the Trump presidency, Republicans could keep control, listen carefully, of the Senate and the House.
Like facts near Cuomo's magic wall, it's time for us to disappear. I'm Eric Scheiner from RCTV. I'll see you again with more media wackiness next week.
Welcome back. One final point before we go tonight. What the mainstream media was too afraid to tell you about the news this week. This week, while the mainstream media obsessed about the 1024th Native American DNA Elizabeth Warren claims makes her a minority woman, here are the things that happened that really matter. A voter fraud ring exposed in the state of Texas. And we're not talking about a couple accidentally fraudulent votes. We're talking about a lot of votes falsified on purpose. 4 women are charged with felonies for intercepting mail ballots and filling them out and then taking them to elderly voters and forcing the elderly voters to sign the falsified vote. And the fraudulent votes were all for Democrats. In fact, one of the 4 women charged is associated with the Democratic Party there. But did the mainstream media tell you about this? No, they did not. In fact, the mainstream media is actively trying to tell you that voter fraud isn't even a thing, even though it is. Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill caught on undercover video by investigative journalists saying she would ban guns if she had the chance, but don't tell voters because she lies to voters and claims she's moderate. McCaskill also admitted that she's the same as Obama policy-wise, and she hides donations from Planned Parenthood so the pro-life people don't come after her. And then, when McCaskill was exposed, she called for legal action against the journalist who exposed her. But did the mainstream media tell you the whole story? Of course they didn't. Instead, they pretend President Trump is a threat to the free press when the Democrat McCaskill is the one actually calling for punishment for a journalist for reporting on her in a way she doesn't like. The Cherokee Nation says Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren, claiming she's Native American based on a DNA test that says she might be 1024th Native, is, quote, inappropriate and wrong. The Cherokee Nation says Warren is hurting tribal interests by making such a ridiculous claim. But did you see this story on the mainstream media? Did you see the headlines reporting the comments from the Cherokee Nation? Oh no, you didn't. The mainstream media wouldn't dream of telling you the truth. Instead, they reported that Trump was wrong, Elizabeth Warren was right, even though that's a lie. Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp doxes sexual assault victims without their permission. Heitkamp is facing an uphill battle for re-election. She's in a red state, and she's a Democrat, and she's currently losing to her Republican challenger. So she issued an ad naming a whole bunch of women who were victims of sexual assault. And then the women said, hey, we didn't give you permission to do that. You're using us as pawns. But did the mainstream media report this story? Barely. Did the media slam Heitkamp for using these women without their consent as political pawns to push their own agenda? No, the mainstream media did not. The mainstream media doesn't care to report any of that to you. So we will. And that is my final point.